Russ, why is it that if anything, you sometimes do too much, right? Because if your teammates can't do it, you just got to take it upon yourself because that's how competitive you are. You want to win. You need to win. Now, it's one thing if you were on a team where we look at the roster and go, all right, come on. And then it's an imperfect roster. No roster's perfect. But you have, I really believe, maybe for the second time in Russell Westbrook's career, he has a legitimate championship squad around him. 2016, I thought that was a championship caliber roster. They didn't get it done. The Cavs did. The Warriors didn't. Neither did the Thunder. Okay. Now, for the second time in your career, Russ, you got a legit championship caliber squad around you. And so we want to know, how great are you? Can you be one of the central pieces that is so good that you guys win a championship? We're looking at you, not as a role player or whatever, but as a central figure in the nucleus of a potential championship team. Of course there's something to prove, because you don't have a championship yet.
Here's the deal. I don't disagree with you, Max. I just want to go a little bit deeper in all seriousness, because obviously Russell Westbrook and I have had some differences, and, I've addressed that, and he's addressed it as well, and everything's cool. Here's the deal. He does have something to prove, first of all, that he can win a championship. Period. There's nothing else left to prove, just to win a championship. And I don't think he meant what he said when he said in the nation's capital a few months ago that championships don't mean nothing to him. He sees plenty of champions who are less happier than himself. I think what we have seen from Russell Westbrook is a guy whose level of sensitivity has been heightened in terms of people creating narratives about him and him sitting back and him no longer sitting back and just taking it. He's going to defend himself, and he's going to fend off those naysayers and some of the things that they may say, myself included, because he believes that anything that comes close to addressing or attacking his character is something that he needs to debunk. I respect that. So I want to sit up there and say on national television, there's no reason nor is there any excuse for us to question the character of Russell Westbrook. The brother gives us 100% every night. He goes out and goes all out every night, plays at 100 miles an hour. He never cheats the game in that regard at all, okay? And off the court, never gets in any kind of trouble whatsoever. He's a high character guy, all right? So I want to make sure that I'm clear with all of those things that I just said, because it's incredibly important that people understand. My point is...
Do we need a lower third for this, or is it too serious?
Say what?
Do we need the lower third about Russell Westbrook for this,
Nope.
or is this too serious?
Nope, we don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it at all, not when it comes to him. Here's what I want him and all the people who love him and know him personally to understand. We are talking about the game of basketball, not his character, certainly not his character as a man, and the great things that he's accomplishing off the court. Max, I was driving down, I think it was somewhere in Burbank, whatever. I mean, Max, it was like a damn near a mile of stores, and all of them were dealerships in his name. The brother's doing big things. I mean, Russell Westbrook's doing big things, man. And there's a certain audience that he's trying to reach and uplift, and he's doing that too. And he does a lot of things in the community that people don't realize about, and he deserves credit for that. At the end of the day, we come back to basketball. And I'm going to stick to my point about this. When you are that great, as great as he is, I don't want to see you in Washington for a team that's squeezing into the playoffs, so that was 13 games under 500. Now, he can't help that. You want to get the hell out of Houston, you got to go where they sent you, and then ultimately you end up landing where you really, really wanted to land, which is back home here in L.A. wearing a Lakers uniform. Fair enough. But now that you're here, and you're an L.A. native, and you starred at UCLA, you know what time it is. You know what Laker Nation expects. You know it's about the chip. And you got to go for it. You don't get it, you don't get it. But you really, really, really got to go for it. That chip has to be the priority, more so than anything else. And in the end, when you look at Russell Westbrook, this is what the bottom line is going to be. He's going to the Hall of Fame. We're going to celebrate him one day as one of the greatest players we've ever seen, when you look at what his resume entails. But Kevin Durant, Serge Ibaka, Reggie Jackson, James Harden, then Victor Oladipo, Paul George, then James Harden again, Bradley Beal, and now LeBron James and Anthony Davis were all teammates of yours at one point in time in your career. It's not a good thing if all of those teammates are people that you had and you don't have one single championship to show for it.
No.
Period. You
His
got to, that has to be the priority. And again, like when he says he has nothing to prove, no, he doesn't as an individual performer. No, he doesn't as a Hall of Famer, Hall of Fame credentials. No, he doesn't with any of those things. It's just with one thing and one thing only. At some point in time, when you got those kind of teammates, you got to have at least one chip to show for it.
Let me just say, we're going to miss Russell Westbrook when he's gone.
Yes,
he's one of those guys we're going to, and if any, for all the haters, you're only hurting yourself because you're missing the ride.
Exactly.
We're going to tell our grandkids that we saw Russell Westbrook. He's that kind of player. We want him to win a championship because, almost out of gratitude, most Westbrook fans, because I think fans want it for him more than anyone else. So that on top of all that other stuff, we'll tell our grandkids about him, we can say he was a champion, an NBA champion.
Max, when you say, last point, when you say we're going to miss him when he's gone, you're absolutely right. We're going to miss him when he's gone. But we're also missing him when he's going home in the first round because we see inferior players that are playing deeper into their seasons. Now, obviously, it might not be because of them. It might be because of the teammates they have. But I'm saying nobody expected much from you last year because you was in D.C., and we know they didn't have that kind of squad.
Yep.
This team?
Got LeBron and AD. LeBron James has never been on a team, ever, with even one other guy we look and go, that's an MVP caliber player. Now he's playing with two of those guys. And Stephen A., it's true even if they don't win the championship because they're playing in a league where another team has even more in the Brooklyn Nets.
You're wrong, number one. Number two, you have no clue what you're talking about. And the reason why you have no clue what you're talking about, Max, is very, very forgivable because your logic is deniable in this particular situation, Vicky. From iRobot, we know
I like
this.
Spock. I like Spock.
Well, you know, but Vicky was Spock too. Spock Kellerman works too. Either way,
I see what you're doing with the Vicky thing. I'm not crazy about it. I
understand that. Yeah, I got it. If it was a different name, that's fine. Vicky's, I respect that. Spock Kellerman. We'll use Spock Kellerman. But the reason why I say you're wrong, Max, is because you're looking at just numbers and you're not taking into account the moments, my brother. You're not taking into account the moments, the environment, the ambiance. Max, you have no idea. I don't care what you saw on TV. I don't care what you've done on TV to cover the Miami Heat in the LeBron James era was something special. I mean, I'm just getting a little bit emotional right now. Just hold on, let me compose myself with this. This is some special stuff, man. Max, not one, not two, not three, not four. We all would get that. We all get that with LeBron. LeBron, as you have publicly acknowledged, was in his prime with Miami.
Yes, he was.
He arrived there as a 26-year-old superstar, clearly en route to being the best on the planet at the time, right? He was there from age 26 to age 30. Chris Bosh is the same age as him, 26 to 30 years of age. He was, even though Chris Bosh stayed a couple of years longer than LeBron. And D-Wade was 29, okay, averaging 25 a game. That first year, people were saying they were like the Beatles, man. Everybody, it was like, it was every day, were followed everywhere. I mean, they were just suffocated. I mean, it was crazy, all right? And LeBron James was just learning about winning. It's like when he went into that meeting and Pat Riley and them showed up to woo him to South Beach, even though him, Chris Bosh, and D-Wade had already made the decision because Melo signed a 5-year deal with Denver a few years earlier that didn't give him an out in that third year. I always told you it was supposed to be Melo in Miami as a member of the Big Three, not Bosh, all right? But Melo messed that up, and that's a different story for another day. So it was Bosh, D-Wade, and LeBron. And when you look at the pressure, when you look at the attention. When you look at the pariah that LeBron had become and how D-Wade had to sit next to him for every single press conference to be protective of him like that big brother, and for them to go out there and to win 58 games and go all the way to the finals and knock off Boston in order to do it and all of this other stuff. I mean, it was special. And so when you look at it from this perspective, we can't even say that this Lakers squad is the best big three. We knew they were the best. The Miami Heat, when LeBron first arrived there, were considered the best. And they were the Goliaths that everybody was trying to knock off. The Lakers, we can't even say that definitively right now because LeBron is going on 37. AD, we got to hope and pray that he stays healthy. And even though Russell Westbrook is a walking triple-double, the adjustments that they're going to have to make in terms of playing with one another, which I'm very confident they'll be able to do because Russell Westbrook was telling the truth. They are friends. You know, I mean, listen, LeBron has had him over at the crib and vice versa. They are boys. They do get along. You know, he is friends with them. That's legit. And I do think that they will do what it takes to work. Please don't get me wrong. But at this moment, we can't definitively say they the big three with KD, Harden, and Kyrie in Brooklyn. And to me, that's the biggest difference.
Let me tell you something.
But it is LeBron's best big three. I think they got to prove it. They already did in Miami.
Okay, wait. Three things. If KD, Harden, and Kyrie were around back then, LeBron wouldn't have had the best three back then. They're just around nowadays. That's not the Lakers' fault that the Brooklyn Nets exist. If KD, Harden, and Kyrie were...
No, KD had Westbrook and James Harden.
Yeah, but they were babies. Come on,
that's what I'm saying.
They were babies.
But that's what I'm saying. I know that. That's what I'm saying. You said back then.
They're not babies anymore.
I'm saying they were babies. I'm saying they were babies.
What I'm saying is if the Nets existed as they do now back then you would still say the Nets got the better big three. Okay,
absolutely right.
So that's not LeBron's fault that he has the second best big three today. There's an even better big three that didn't used to exist. Let me say this about two things you're right about. Number one, this Lakers big three has to prove it. They haven't done that yet. I should say they could be the best big three. They got to go out and prove it. They got to stay healthy, et cetera.
I can give you that.
And I'll give you one more point.
I can give you that.
And I'm not going to talk about your experiences in Miami. I'm going to stay with basketball reasons. Let's stay with basketball. Yeah, I know. Or even cultural impact, because the Heatles were something different. I agree. It was special, right? I'll say this. The point you make that is true is that LeBron James was in his physical prime back then. That is not the case now. He was playing both ends of the floor as well as better than he'd ever played it, really, by year two in Miami, right? And he's diminished now. Because when I hear the best big three LeBron has ever played with, I'm really thinking about his teammates. Dwayne Wade was only 29, but I think you would agree he wasn't quite what he'd been a couple of years before. And Bosh is a great player.
First year. Your first year was when he averaged 25.
They didn't win
when
the
he
chip
averaged
that
25
year.
and he had to lead and he had to step back year two because he knew the team would be better with LeBron. But year one in Miami.
You think so? You know, when LeBron got there, I thought of Wade as a top 3-4 player in the league the year before LeBron got there, along with Kobe, Duncan, and LeBron.
Yeah, but
Wade
what I'm saying is that when he got there, he stepped back just a touch. He stepped back just a little for LeBron because LeBron had arrived, but he still averaged 25 and a half.
It could be that I'm being fooled by the diminished numbers because he had to share the ball with LeBron. But to my eye, Wade actually looked not quite as good as he had been. But I'll say this. To me, AD and Westbrook are potentially better teammates because they're closer to their athletic. He's not enough for the Lakers to bring home the title. It's not a knock against Melo. It's just that the Brooklyn Nets exist. And if they are healthy, they have too much firepower. And the Lakers are constructed imperfectly, though they did an amazing job in the offseason. Carmelo was an excellent pickup, I think. To lead your second unit, he has real value. I don't know about in the starting unit. I'm guessing Wayne Ellington starts and maybe Gasol or maybe Carmelo does and they play a smaller lineup. I don't know. But as a leading scorer in the second unit, Carmelo's a really good job. But this doesn't actually affect his legacy that much if they were to win a championship. And Stephen A., this should be when you talk about the pressure on Russell Westbrook this year, Carmelo should serve as a reminder to Russell Westbrook of that pressure every day. Because even if they win a championship, it won't be with the real Carmelo Anthony. It will be with an old, diminished Carmelo. I want to be very clear. When I thought he was cooked, I was wrong, and he was right. He proved his point in Portland. He is a valuable piece in the NBA. On a good NBA team, he can still play. Okay, I want to make that perfectly clear. But this is not Carmelo Anthony of half a dozen years ago.
Is LeBron James a top 5 player on the planet? Yes. Is Anthony Davis a top 5 player on the planet? Yes. When you look at Russell Westbrook, a walking triple-double, as he is presently constructed right now, look at what he brings to the table. He's box office. He plays at 100 miles an hour. He goes after it. We all know what he brings to the table. Carmelo Anthony was never viewed in that light. He was a prolific scorer, a career 24-point-per-game scorer up until a couple of years ago. We knew what he could do offensively, and he was special in that regard. But when you talked about top 5 players on the planet, Carmelo Anthony wasn't in that conversation. And so now we fast forward to 2021-22 season. And what do we see now? We see a dude that's fresh off of shooting 40% from the field, a dude that averaged 13 a game last year after averaging 15 a game the year before. All right, COVID and all of that other stuff that was going on, C.J. McCollum being out, all of these different things happen. But in the end, when you look at Carmelo Anthony, he's a 6'8" perimeter player. You still look at him in that regard. Clearly, you can look at him and say he's not what he used to be. I'm not trying to act like that's not the case. But this precipitous drop-off that everybody tried to put out there about him when he couldn't get a damn job in the league, and then he ultimately ended up being interviewed right here in this studio with me, looking for a job. It was utterly ridiculous and insane that he was ever subjected to that. And what did LeBron James do at that particular moment in time? The answer would be nothing. LeBron James should have had Carmelo Anthony as a teammate. I understand that Carmelo ultimately ended up going to Portland. I understand that LeBron James had to come in there and say, now's the time. We got to get together on this. But easily the argument could be made. This is something LeBron James should have done years ago. LeBron James has had at least a couple of opportunities to have Carmelo Anthony as his teammate at least a couple of years ago, particularly and specifically when Carmelo Anthony was unemployed and nobody in the league wanted to touch him. And LeBron did not make that happen. Now that he's on the Lakers, let me tell you this. With LeBron, with AD, with a guy like Russell Westbrook who's going to create open shots, don't sleep on Malik Monk. Don't sleep on Horton Tucker. Don't sleep on these brothers if you give them wide open shots, because you've got to prioritize defending the big three. They can do some things for you. That makes them a championship contender, and I'm happy that he's in Los Angeles, and I think he makes them better, not worse.
First, when you say that's my narrative, let's put it this way. I'll give you a spectrum of credit given to point guards who won championships. You can disagree. Isaiah Thomas gets more credit for his championships as the point guard than Jason Kidd does because of where Isaiah was in his career at the time. It was very clear. Isaiah was a great player who was probably, I would say, it was a very good team.
Pause before you go on.
Yeah.
Pause before you go on.
Yeah.
My point is, I understand what you're saying about where Isaiah is. What I'm saying is, in Jason Kidd's best day, still, Dirk Nowitzki was on another level.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
That's what
fine.
I'm saying.
You can be the second best player on the team. I mean, had Kidd done it a few years earlier, I believe he would have gotten more credit when he was more at the height of his powers. He was still an excellent player because he was a great player, but he was no longer what he once had been, in my view. And therefore, Isaiah, on the spectrum of how much credit you give guys for championships, right? Isaiah's over here, Kidd's over here, Peyton's is over there, right? It goes on that spectrum. Peyton gets the least credit because he was least close to his prime. And my point for Carmelo is, yes, it'd be a nice thing for him to win a championship if he contributes as a valuable runner of the second unit offense or focal point of the second unit offense. He will get real credit. If he's an 18-minute-a-game player who plays sometimes, he will get less. But at any rate, it won't mean the same to his legacy as had he done it half a dozen years ago when he was one of the very best players in the league.
All I'm saying is that depends on the team. Like, for example, if you're talking to me about Carmelo Anthony in the role now compared to when he was with New York or Denver, that's a given. But what I'm trying to say is that, Max, if he averages 20 to 25 a game, if he averages 20, 25 minutes a game, right? Let's say, for example, he averages 15 to 18 a game. and come playoff time, and particularly the finals, that's the brother you go to in the fourth quarter that's drilling 3 or 4 perimeter shots. I'm saying to you, that's going to be a very valuable component, and nobody's going to be talking about a drop-off because that's what we were accustomed to seeing from Carmelo.
I agree. I think that is an unlikely scenario. I'd root for it to happen because contrary to popular belief, I do root for Carmelo Anthony. He was the one guy in 25 years who was like, I want to go to the Knicks when I used to root for the Knicks, and I always appreciated that. So I would hope that you're right. I'm saying, I would say the odds are against that Carmelo is an 15 to 18 point a game scorer this season, and in the playoffs is even better in critical moments. But it would take something like that for it to really have an influence on his legacy.